Winter hiking season is here at last. As you can see, we've got some gorgeous snow, but it's not quite deep enough for snowshoeing or backcountry skiing. So while I'm waiting for the snow to deepen as much as I'd like it to, I thought I'd take time to answer some of your questions. And since I recently put out a call and a lot of you were kind enough to send questions to me, I'll answer them now. But I want to make sure that I answer all your questions, and I'm not good enough to have all this memorized. So let's go and talk at my house where I've got some notes in terms of what exactly I wanted to say. I'll see you there. Okay, this is much better. Now, first I want to thank everybody who sent questions. I got tons of different questions. It was really nice to hear from so many people. Now, I did get a lot of similar, sort of overlapping questions, and so to make this go smoother and not take an hour and a half, I've sort of simplified it and broken it down into a few basic categories. Most of the questions, as you might think, are about hiking. Then the second group are about hiking gear and food related to hiking. Then more general Japan-related questions, language, culture, things like that. And finally, a few sort of personal questions about me and the channel itself. Let's jump right in. One question I got is where I would like to live in Japan, except where I'm already living, that being Morioka, Iwate. And that would definitely be Hokkaido. I think I would either live somewhere in Sapporo, maybe on the outskirts, because Sapporo is a fun town, but it's also still got a lot of beautiful natural areas around it. Or maybe even someplace like Furano or Asahikawa because of all the great hiking, skiing, and stuff you can do around there. Someone asked me about sake brewery tours in Iwate. There are a number of options. On the coast in Kamaishi, Hamachidori is a really friendly place. You can go on tours of there for free, but it's kind of hard to go out to Kamaishi. So I would probably most recommend Washino in Hachimantai. It is a really old building. It's, I think, more than 300 years old. It's gorgeous. Also free tours there. And the Kuromoto, the owner, is also really interesting and went to Tokyo University. He was, I think, an engineer before he came back to take over responsibility for the brewery. And he does some really nice tasting experiences if you book those in advance. I got a question on if I still run an Airbnb and guide people on tours. Thank you so much for asking that very kind question. I do appreciate it. Yes, of course I do. In 2015, I bought the house where I live in now, and I also started using it for Airbnb. There are two really beautiful washitsu, sort of the Japanese tatami rooms. And yeah, I host groups up to 4 people, all the same group. And so if 1 to 4 people are coming, you can come and stay in my house. Of course, you're sharing the public areas with me. And yeah, I'm just getting back into the swing of guiding groups. I'm in the process of setting up a number of set tours, which you can find or will be able to find soon on Airbnb Experiences, Viator, TripAdvisor, things like that. But I also can be booked directly, and that might actually be the best idea in that I can then design something that fits perfectly for your interests. You can hit me up through my website, GoNorth.jp, or through Twitter, Instagram, email through the YouTube channel, and ask me, make a reservation. I don't want to mention any specific rates because it varies with the season, demand, things like that, but I'm pretty affordable. One person asked if I have any experience with the JLPT, the Japanese Language Proficiency Test. Yes, I do. Back when I first came to Japan, I studied Japanese really enthusiastically. Spent tons of time on that. This was a long time ago. In 2003, I passed level 2, or the Nikyu of that, and then in 2004, I took and passed the top level. And I know there's whole channels devoted to helping you with that, and so I'll just keep it brief and say, yes, I did take it, and maybe my Japanese has been downhill ever since because I stopped studying. I got a couple questions on my favorite hot springs, onsen. And there are so many good ones. I'll mention just a few. In the Nyuto Onsen Kyo in Akita, Tsurunoyu is just iconic. It's glorious. The mixed bath, the outdoor Rotemburo mixed bath is wonderful. I love that a lot. Also in the Hanamaki Minami Onsenkyo, the South Hot Springs area, there are 2 hot springs that I love. One is Yamanokami Onsen, which is the mountain god hot springs. Specifically, that one is called Ryokan, and that has just amazing water. It doesn't smell strongly of sulfur. It's just slippery smooth. Really recommend that place. Also, right near it is Osawa Hot Springs, which has a very atmospheric and affordable ryokan you can stay in. I'll link to that as well. In fact, I did a whole video there, which I'll link to that video I did at Osawa Hot Springs. Of course, there's tons of famous ones, Ginzan and Yamagata. Well, they're all over the place. I also got a question on my thoughts on urban exploration, or, exploring ruins, haikyo, as they say. And yeah, I love it. I love doing that. It's so much fun. I know the legality of it is a little bit gray, and most of those areas have no trespassing signs, but in Japan, for the majority of them, there are not fines, though. It's something that, yeah, it's gray. And so I don't necessarily recommend other people go there because I don't want to be responsible for anyone getting injured or in trouble. But I personally do love going there and exploring them, and I do it fairly frequently. It's just, yeah, I'm not sure in terms of talking about it in public because of the gray legality. That said, a lot of very well-known YouTubers, Chris Broad, Charla, and others have made videos visiting all kinds of ruins, and they didn't seem to get in any trouble for doing that, so maybe it's not such a big deal. At any rate, I love it, and I've been exploring areas like that since I was 16 years old, and I explored the maintenance tunnels below the UW campus, and then the gold medal flour factory in Minneapolis before they turned it into the Mill Museum, or whatever it is now. Fun, fun, fun. I got a question also about drone regulations. Now, I'm sure there's whole videos about drone regulations in Japan, so I will keep it brief. Basically, it did get updated recently in 2022. Now you need to register with the government, pay a small fee. It's less than $20. You need to write your registration number on the drone itself. Of course, you can't fly in urban centers over or near airports, stations, in a lot of cases over the train tracks is also forbidden. And there's a lot of areas where it's not necessarily illegal, but you need to get written permission in advance. It's kind of messy right now, to be totally honest, but the only thing you can really get fined for is breaking those initial rules I mentioned about big city centers, airports, military infrastructure, things like that. The other areas where you're supposed to get permission, but you won't get in trouble if you don't. For example, I flew my drone near Mount Chokai, near the summit of Mount Chokai recently, and that's a quasi-national park, which I had checked and found there's no special regulation, and I could fly it there, but then I got kind of scolded because apparently I needed to have the written permission of not only the park, which I did have, but also the city hall, and then also the shrine. There's like a shrine near the summit, and I was supposed to go to that shrine and get permission for the head of them to fly the drone nearby the summit. And that's kind of messy because if you Google it, there's nowhere on the internet which says you need those permissions. And so it's frustrating from my perspective because it's like there's no way to check in advance where you need to get permission from. Bright side, I just got scolded because I didn't break any laws and I had registered. So there was no fine for me. I was just dirty looks from this one guy. I got another question on if people in Tohoku are shy. Now, that is a common stereotype. A lot of people say that the people of North Japan, of Tohoku, are shy, and another stereotype would be that they're welcoming and kind and warm, but yeah, shy and humble. I hesitate with stereotypes. I mean, of course, they're going to be true with some and not true with other people, and it also depends where, Tohoku is not monolithic. Even within, say, Aomori Prefecture, for example, there are two areas. One that used to be the Tsurugu fief, or the Tsurugu Han in the Edo period, and the other that was part of the Nambu Han. And supposedly the personality of those two people is different, according to people from Aomori. And then in Iwate itself, the common stereotypes about personalities for people who live inland versus those who live on the coast is different. So it's hard to say, but generally speaking, yeah, probably compared to people in Kansai or Kyushu, you could safely say that Tohoku people are comparatively shy in most cases. One of the most common questions that I got is where I haven't hiked yet that I would like to hike, sort of a bucket list of hiking locations, both in Japan and internationally. In Japan, I still have yet to get to Yakushima Island in Kagoshima Prefecture, down in Kyushu. Now this island, if you're not familiar with it, has all this primeval virgin forest, some of the most ancient, gigantic cedar trees probably in the world, and it's just filled with waterfalls and trails, and the photos and videos I've seen are just amazing. I Cannot wait to get down there, hopefully in 2023 or at the latest 2024. The other place in Japan that I really want to get to that I haven't been able to get to yet is the Japanese Alps. There are all kinds of mountains over 3,000 meters high, or 3,500 meters actually, and there are tons of great traverses where you could easily make it a 4 or 5 day hike. In terms of outside of Japan, I would love to visit the Isle of Skye in Scotland, of course, Iceland, Norway. There's so many great places to hike all over the world. Those are just a few that I'm excited about. What are your favorite places? In the comments, mention some of the places that you would love to go hiking. Another question that I got from several people was relating to easy hikes from Tokyo, or at least easy to access day hikes from Tokyo. I haven't done a lot of hiking in that area, so I'm not the most knowledgeable about it. I have gone up Mount Takao. It's very touristy, it's very crowded, it's not exactly scenic. I might suggest going out west to Okutama, or at least the Ome areas, and there are a number of hiking trails from there. I haven't done that many myself, but if you just Google Okutama and Ome, O-M-E, then you're likely to find some great options. In addition to hikes from Tokyo, some people just asked me about what I would recommend in terms of hikes for people who are just visiting Japan, in terms of hikes that are easy to access the trailhead with mass transit. And that's a really good point, because most of the hikes in Japan are really hard to get to, and you really do need to have your own car or use a taxi or something to drive to them. But there are exceptions. I would recommend using trailheads that are right next to hotels, or Japanese Ryokan actually. For example, if you stay in Akita at the Nyuto hot springs area, which is one of my favorite hot springs areas, there's a place called Kuroyu and another one called Magoroku. And these two areas, I'll put links to them in the description, have trailheads that will go up Mount Nyuto. It's a fantastic mountain. It's not too hard to do. I mean, you want real boots, but it's not gonna knock you out, and it's got great views from the summit. I very much recommend doing Mount Nyuto from those two hot springs. You can stay in the hotel 2 nights and just do that on the day in between. Come right back down and take a bath in the hot springs there. Another example of a place like this is in Hachimantai. You can stay at the Matsakawa hot springs. There are 2 choices of hot springs that you can stay at that are right near the trailhead, Matsakawa-so and Kyoun-so. And if you stay there, you can go to Mount Mitsuishi or do a full loop. I've done videos there, but I really recommend that hike as well. You could make it longer by doing the full traverse, which is about 14 kilometers, or just go up to Mitsuishi and back, which round trip I believe is less than 8K, but really stunningly beautiful in September, in late September, when it's turning orange with all those little dwarf maple trees. Hakora in Aomori also has great access to mass transit, and that area is just perfect, even in the winter. Any time of year, that area is just stunningly gorgeous. I could go on with this, so I'm going to leave it at that. I'll put all this information in the description. Someone asked if I was going to do a Mount Fuji hike for you guys. The short answer, will I hike Mount Fuji? Yes, I will. I'm going to try and do it this next summer of 2023 with a guy named Victor, Frame of Travel, on social media. I'll link to his socials in the description. He often does these ocean to summit hikes, or from 0 elevation all the way to up 3,700-ish, and I'm going to go with him this year. That is the plan. Another question was, what is my favorite coastal hike? And that is definitely an area of the Michinoku Coastal Trail in Tanohata Village on the sort of slightly northeastern coast of Iwate. And that is specifically between the Kita-Yamazaki coastline. There's a really gorgeous viewpoint, an area of cliffs there with some just stunning rock formations just off the coast. And Unosu Cliffs, a little bit to the south of that, but still in Tanohata. And that area also has these 200-meter high cliffs, hand-carved tunnels. It's really just stunning, as I'm sure you can see from this footage I'm putting over this right now. There's a lot of up and down. You got to be pretty fit for this hike, but it is worth it. I also really recommend kayaking near this area as well, which I can guide you on, or at least interpret for the guide. There is a man named Mr. Suzuki who lives in Miyako, just south of there, who takes kayaking groups, and I work with him sometimes as an interpreter. Feel free to contact him directly or through me if you like. What is Japan's go-to hiking website? There are a number of them. The one that I use, and I believe is the best, most popular, one I use is called Yamap, Y-A-M-A-P. It's also an app that you can use to download maps in advance, so even if you have no reception, you've still got a GPS-assisted map of where you are. It also functions as sort of social media in that you can publish your hikes and people can comment, ask you questions, and likewise I check other people's hikes to see what the current conditions are on the mountains, because you can always see other people who are hiking the same routes. I find it really useful. What is the toughest mountain to hike in North Japan? To be honest, I think that's probably Mount Iwate. Mount Iwate may only be the third highest mountain in North Japan, but the trails are often more difficult than, say, Chokai, the second highest, or Mount Hyuchi Gatake in Fukushima, which is the highest mountain in North Japan. In fact, a lot of the trails are more difficult than the standard routes that people take up Mount Fuji. So yeah, respect Mount Iwate. It's also crazy gorgeous. Love, love, love it. Instead of most difficult or favorite, someone asked me what I found the most rewarding hike that I'd ever done been. And that's difficult because so many hikes are so rewarding. But I think that would have to be the Yamabushi hike that I did with Tim and his Yamabushi teacher in Yamagata Prefecture across the Dewa Sanzan. We did all three of them. We hiked from Mount Haguro, and then we went all the way from there on foot to Gassan and then to Yudono-san, and it was definitely the most fulfilling because of the people I went with and learning a lot about the faith associated with those, the history, and the spiritual culture that goes with those mountains. So yeah, definitely Dewa Sanzan in Yamagata. A couple of people asked me for my advice on people just getting started hiking or how people ought to just get started hiking. And that's really individual. I would just say to make sure you have fun every time. Don't make it an ordeal, make it a treat. Go places that maybe aren't going to be overly taxing on your body at first, but that make you feel like you're visiting another world. I love the feeling of just going somewhere completely different, transformed outside of daily life. And so if you can hike anywhere a little bit high altitude without having to walk all the way up there, maybe there's a ropeway or a bus that takes you up most of the way, I would recommend starting up with those. Go places that just make you want to go back again and again. And if you enjoy any type of exercise or hobby, that's what's going to lead to you continuing with it and deepening your passion for it, in my experience anyway. The other large category that a lot of questions are about, maybe the most actually, is gear. Hiking gear. I got so many questions about hiking boots. I don't feel right telling you what hiking boots you should buy. What sort of footwear you use when you're hiking is a really individual decision. I can tell you about what I wear, and I will, but I think often the best thing to do is to go to an outfitting place like REI or any number of different mountain brand places, whether that's North Face, Patagonia, Montbell, and there will be really knowledgeable staff there that you can talk to about what sort of hiking you're going to do, what your feet are like. You can try different things and try them out for yourself. Personally, I have 3 different sets of hiking footwear that I go between depending on the case. In the winter season, I have a pair of hiking boots from Sorel that are at least supposedly good to temperatures down to minus 30 degrees Celsius. Now, I'm not going to test that out because I don't want to go hiking in minus 30 degrees Celsius. That sounds dangerous and miserable. But they are really warm, and I've taken them on several hikes where it's gone down at least below minus 15, and yeah, they were really toasty. In the spring, summer, and fall, when I'm going on longer hikes and I'm carrying a heavy load, I like wearing a pair of waterproof Gore-Tex boots. I use Montbell ones because Montbell is less expensive than a lot of other, maybe more higher end brands, and the quality is fine. Hiking shoes, or trail running shoes, as they're more often called, are also a really good option. Let me just repeat that you're going to get the best advice for footwear just going to a mountain outfitter shop and talking with someone there and trying them on. I know it works for me, but I'm not claiming to be, by any stretch, an expert on what footwear is good for anyone except me. Someone asked me what my favorite gear was, and I also got a question for what the oldest hiking gear that I still use is. And for both of those questions, it's actually the same answer. I love my snowshoes. I've got some MSR Lightning Ascent snowshoes, which I got, I believe, 3.5 years ago, but they were already used when I had them, and they were only probably 4 or 5 years old then. They're older models, they still work really well, and I love snowshoes. They're just so much fun to use, and they last a fairly long time. Most of my other gear, whether it's clothing or shoes, I wear through it pretty quickly, and after just 2 or 3 years, I end up having to replace it. But my snowshoes still live. I got a couple questions about affordable gear. Where can you get affordable hiking gear in Japan? Well, the cheapest place that you can get gear that you can use for hiking is going to be a place called Workman. Workman has really discount brands. I believe Field Core is the name of their brand, and it's good enough for a lot of situations. Personally, I go one level up from that into Monbel, which this is even a Monbel shirt that I'm wearing right now. And Monbel I find to be much cheaper than the more premium brands like North Face, Patagonia, Arc'teryx, things like that. But the quality is pretty good, though in some cases, yeah, it can be half the price of the same stuff from Arc'teryx or Patagonia. I got one question about where I stand on waterproof footwear and waterproof socks. And yeah, I absolutely require waterproof boots and shoes. Yeah, it's really important because I go through a lot of places that are wet, muddy, swampy, and so it's vital. I also wear gaiters, which add to that waterproofing. I've never worn waterproof socks. I just prefer the nice, natural, thick wool hiking socks. They can be up to $30 a pair or so, but they're absolutely necessary. You need to invest in good socks. I've said it before. I will say it again. Get good socks. I also got a question about where I stand on bear bells. I don't wear a bear bell anymore. I'm not sure that they're that effective, really, if at all. However, they are really standard in Japan, and there is a strong culture of wearing bear bells here. And I don't want to disrespect local people who swear by bear bells. I don't wear them, but, you know, I'm used to hearing them, and, you know, maybe they work. I could be wrong. I got a lot of people asking me about what sort of food I bring with me on hikes. And yeah, that's a great question. I know a lot of people who actually cook great meals for themselves and then maybe just reheat them with a little gas heater on summits or near the lodges. I'm not one of those people. I generally just buy something at the convenience store on my way. It's just so easy to get some onigiri, you know, the rice balls you can get at convenience stores. I often get those. I'll sometimes get sandwiches, and there's something called salad chicken or sarada chicken, which is basically a boiled chicken that's often seasoned to great, delicious effect that you get in a plastic bag, and you can just open it, just peel it open and sort of munch on the cooked chicken as it is. It's great for protein. I also generally will bring chocolate covered almonds or something like that that has both protein and sugar, and I try to carry enough little sugary, salty, sweet snacks that I can hand them out to other people, because one really important thing when hiking is to be constantly nibbling on little things that have salt and sugar so that your muscles don't cramp up. It's really important, and it's a good way to prevent that happening. And forgetting to snack consistently is a great way to suffer and cause yourself pain and have your legs lock up when you're just almost about to get to the summit. So definitely you need to snack a lot. It's vital. Okay, that brings us finally to the personal questions about the channel and me. I assume anybody who's still watching after all this, I don't know how short I'm going to be able to cut this down to, but I'm guessing this has already been a long video, and you're still here. So I guess you're the people who, yeah, who are interested in indulging me and letting me talk about my own personal things. So one question that I got was, when did my love for hiking start? And that's a really hard question. I mean, should I say in 2013 in October when I first hiked Mount Iwate? Or would it be back in 2007 or 8 when I was first experiencing trekking for multiple days around the Annapurna area of Nepal? Or do I go all the way back to when I was 5 years old and I lived next to the Arboretum in Madison, Wisconsin, and used to spend my days running around in the forest there? What is causation? How does it work? Is there free will? I don't know. It's Yeah, I've loved hiking for a long time. My parents took me camping a lot as a kid, but I really only started hiking a lot regularly in the last 4 or 5 years. In the last 4 or 5 years, it's just ramped up. And then with the pandemic, I had a lot of spare time and not much work. And so I was able to go hiking far more often than I had in the past. Another question I got about what music I like. I like all kinds of music, of course, as everybody does, right? I tend to be gravitating toward emotionally intense music lately. So recently I've been listening to a lot of Mount Erie, Bon Iver, Sufjan Stevens. I also like a lot of, I don't know how you describe it, atmospheric music, but what music isn't atmospheric, right? But anyways, a lot of that would be Joy Division, Portishead, Massive Attack, Slow Dive. Of course, I grew up listening to Skinny Puppy and Nine Inch Nails, some playful stuff like My Life with a Thrill Kill Cult, of course the Pixies, Tom Waits, Death Grips, Idols, Run the Jewels, Ani DeFranco. Yeah, I could go on. I've made a few playlists on Spotify, which I will link to in the description. Thank you for your curiosity about the music I like. I did get asked what first brought me to Japan, and I've always sort of hesitated to really answer this question because this is the question I always get, that everybody who lives here always gets from Japanese people. And it's sure, it's a very good question. Of course, you'd be curious, why did you come here? And so, yeah, okay, I'll tell you. I really think it was just by chance. I was at UW-Madison studying classical Tibetan language and Buddhism. I had a seminar in gender roles in Hindi film, and someone who I had that class with, I happened to fall in love with, and ended up having a really serious, long relationship with them. And so when we graduated, that person just happened to be Japanese. And so I went back with them to Japan. And yeah, I mean, we broke up years and years ago, but they're still a good friend, and I regret nothing. So I planned to come for a year or two, but yeah, that was 22 years ago. And I found a lot to love here, though I arrived knowing pretty much nothing. Okay, this has been, I'm guessing, a very long video. I hope it was interesting, or better still, useful in some way. Thank you so much for sticking around until the end. And hopefully, I'll see you on the trails. 月の御山の神あやにあや